Summer has come in Tennessee. This video today is about food. It's about what do I eat and what do I avoid, how I think when about food in United States, because in US, of course, it's extremely hard to not be sick if you have autoimmune, any sort of autoimmune condition. And many people narrow things down all the way to where they just end up going carnivore. All they eat is just meat, and even that meat has to be restricted to unaged beef, because every beef that hits the market is USDA inspected, and when it's USDA inspected, it has to follow the guidelines. It has to be sprayed with lactic acid and other chemicals before it hits the market. So because of that, I don't actually do carnivore. In fact, I have been on this hunt for protein to understand how and where can I make sure I have enough protein, right? Because I actually have been working out and I'm trying to develop muscle. I definitely need protein. I definitely like animal protein. All the beans and legumes and all that is so heavily processed also. I'm not going to consume beans. I don't feel good when I consume beans. Which brings me to this video of laying out what system I follow that keeps me healthy in the United States. I slip up sometimes, of course. It's difficult not to sleep up. Sometimes I test new products because I need to increase the amount of things I can eat. So sometimes I take a chance and test something and I fail, or the product fails me technically. And then I reset, and it's pretty tough to get your system actually back to normal so that you can start fresh. But I have a system, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. And when I said Italy and jumped into food, this is what I was thinking about actually. I buy my olive oil from a farm in Italy, this farm. And when you smell or taste this, you wonder, what the heck are we eating in the United States? You buy this and you take your organic 100% olive oil from any shelf in your Whole Foods or Kroger, and you smell these next to each other, you taste these next to each other, and you see the insane difference of the taste and the smell, where you're like, oh my god, that's just pure chemical, I guess, because there's just barely any hint of real olives in there. But anyway, so I'll start with that, I guess. So when it comes to my oils, I try to basically use as little oils as possible. Olive oil I use on, of course, not non-high heat things like salads, smoothies, or I put on my food afterwards because olive oil doesn't like high heat. I do use avocado oil for my high heat stuff, but it seems to work. But I also consume very little of it because I don't really know what's in it, to be honest. I do like butter sometimes, but it's complete hit or miss. If I haven't figured out one brand that I can trust just yet, because sometimes it's perfectly fine and sometimes it's not. I of course go for highest quality I can find, but it's still hit or miss. Same with ghee, because again, it's all processed, and you just have to try to find your brand that you can trust, which of course, even when you find a brand to trust them, you still have to keep making sure they didn't change something on you down the line, right? Because just because it's good now doesn't mean it's good later. For example, I have not been eating fruits, and I love fruits. I don't seem to react to berries like I eat blueberries and raspberries. I don't like strawberries. Strawberries don't settle well. I eat blueberries and raspberries. I used to love fruits, and I can't have fruits right now. And I noticed that the best way, if you want to consume fruits, is to stick to seasonal fruits. If the fruit is not in season, then don't eat it. Then you have to wonder, where is it coming from? what processes did it go through to last this long to get to your plate. But of course, if you're going to apple picking in your local farm, most likely that fruit is fine. Sure, there will be some pesticides, but I actually have zero worries about pesticides. My concern and my issues are with the processing aids. When it comes to fruits, let me bring up my notes so that I'm not forgetting things, okay? Avoid fruits that are not in season. Buy from local farmers markets. Yes, beef and meats, even local farmers market beef and meat still goes through USDA. It has to, and it still gets poisoned. But when it comes to fruits and vegetables, your farmers market fruits and vegetables are more likely than not okay. But again, if it's in season. Farmers, they still have to, even when it's not their product, they still have to continue, supporting their families, which means sometimes they might buy cheap from somewhere to sell somewhere else. Now you don't know where it's coming from and what kind of process did it go through. So basically, even when you go to farmers market, you have to be very mindful, and you cannot assume it's organic because it's a farmer's market. You cannot assume it has no preservatives because it's a farmer's market. You cannot assume that farmer sitting there selling that every single item on that table is produced by them. They buy and sell as well. Another thing I noticed, I do quite well with exotic fruits or tropical fruits. However, it really depends, again, where it's coming from. Is it in season? For example, I was in Costa Rica with my friend Whitney a couple of years ago, and we went into their market and just grabbed just about everything we could barely recognize. Some of these, of course, we recognize, like the papaya and the star fruit. And these were delicious. These were fresh from the market. Granted, it's in Costa Rica, but oftentimes when these things are in season, you will see your grocery store having a section for these exotic fruits. And I don't know how to relate this part, but like I can tell if these are real fresh fruits or if they just look too perfect or too polished. And I think that's something to look out for, perhaps. But yeah, these were great, and I do usually well if I have a fruit craving. These can come in handy, although of course I miss my regular fruits like apples and pears and such. When it comes to veggies and produce and such, this is what I do. I stick to roots. Turnips, beets, carrots, radishes, potatoes, yuca, sweet potatoes, yams. So those kind of things seem to be fine because roots last a very long time. So there is no actual need for processing them to make it last a long time. Probably some minor processes still happens, but when it comes to these turnips, beets, daikon, carrots, potatoes and so on, I have not had any issues unless I'm adding stuff and seasonings, for example. Be very, very careful with your seasonings. Very careful with seasonings. Some pure sea salt and avoid other things, especially if you're sensitive. But I do roots, and I also do things that I know don't easily go bad, like cabbage, kale, collard greens, asparagus. So there are certain things that if you've ever grown anything or if you know anything about growing, you understand that these things actually last a long time on their own. There is no need to process your cabbage, not to mention there's so many layers. You can at least, if you had any issues with the layers, you can probably just peel some layers off and then you have good layers left underneath. So that's my thinking when it comes to my produce. It's limited, but at least it's not, it gives me at least something to go by. And I don't feel sick when I eat these things. I should probably take a moment and go over some visuals, I suppose, because I always get two types of people when I speak. They immediately understand what I mean. But there's insane amount of times when I'll say root vegetables, let's say, and they will just basically be like, can you give me examples? Like, what do you mean by root vegetables? And sometimes it's age difference, sometimes it's where they grew up. But the amount of times I get asked, like, what is that? And they're looking at a pear or something. And the first time a friend of mine picked up a pear and said, is this an apple or something like that? I laughed and I thought he was being funny. And then as life has gone by, as so many more people have made such remarks, when I'm like, wow, like people really don't know their fruits and vegetables. Makes me feel very old. It's a thing of the past. I already named a lot of these. There's a thing called Jerusalem artichoke that isn't in any photos, but like I love that too, actually. But things basically that grow below ground. I feel funny saying these things. But carrots, parsnips, sweet potatoes, beets, as I already mentioned, some of these potatoes, they're not as bad as we sometimes think. Actually, of course, everything in moderation. And we're still talking about farmers markets rather than grocery stores. Obviously, if all you have is grocery stores, then make sure things are in season, just like fruits. If whatever you're consuming isn't in season, then you might want to think twice. And yucca, this one is yucca. I don't actually even know what this giant thing is. And also, when you buy fresh produce like this or fresh roots and they have these greens, oftentimes I see people toss these out, but these are perfectly great vegetables. You can eat these. You can eat them raw. You can make a salad. You can saute them with a little eggs and garlic here and there. So these are edible. I do eat broccoli. Another thing I want to mention is some of these things can be good in a frozen format, because let's say if you have tomatoes and you want the tomatoes to get from point A to point B to be sold, oftentimes they collect these tomatoes green and they process it all sorts of ways, and it just basically ripens and reddens on the way. This is why there's not a lot of taste left in them. It's just tasteless. But if you, let's say, were to freeze tomatoes, which is a bad example, I've never seen frozen tomatoes, but let's say blueberries, you let them ripe the way they're supposed to with the sun and so on, and you preserve it right off the bat through freezing, then you don't have to actually do more preservations or more chemicals or so on, because you are freezing it. And that freezing process is already a preservation. So sometimes these frozen berries and fruits and vegetables can actually be good, including some frozen meats, some like salmon, for example. When I buy it from the store, there's always some chemicals added. It seems to be okay, not great, not 100%, but okay. And one more thing I want to mention is you can always go out on a walk and see if your neighborhood has random, trees like mulberry trees and such, because sometimes these organic natural things that maybe are around the city can be very, very nutritious and healthy and good for you. Even if it's just a handful, that's probably more than your entire meal that has no nutrition in it. So and don't shy away from growing some of these things. Even if you live in an apartment, experiment with it. Everywhere I've lived, I've experimented a little bit. For example, like I grew these zucchini and kale. They're so easy to grow. Potatoes are so incredibly easy to grow. You can just put them in there and just water a little bit, and they're just so resilient and fast growing. You will reap the benefits. Even if you're in an apartment with south-facing windows, you can absolutely grow some of these things. That doesn't require a lot of space. Zucchini requires a lot of space, but like potatoes, just in a bag you can even grow, or and then you can just dump it over and you have your potatoes. It's not that difficult, but in Texas I had a lot more land, but I sold that. This was an experiment I was doing to see if the soil can support anything. This is one of my videos I did on my Chef Monkey channel, or actually the same channel, but the name Chef Monkey. And I go over these plants like lamb tongue and dandelion and their benefits, which is, it's a good video to know what you can eat that's around you. that is very nutritious that we might not think of. I already went over the seasonal and local stuff. So now let's go into some starches. Okay, rice, for example. I actually feel quite fine with rice, and in fact, it seems to aid my digestion. So, however, not all rice are made equal. Jasmine rice and pastrami rice seem to be the best ones. And even then, you have to read the label, because be very careful when it's long grain, short grain, because that has citric acid. I don't know why, but it does. So I used to it was hit or miss with rice for a while, and I was like, what the heck is going on? And this kind of mistakes happen even when you're always on a lookout. It had never occurred to me, this is years ago, to look at the label for rice, because it's just rice. And why would there be citric acid? So one day I look at the thing, and I was like, right after I got sick, I was like, all right, that was literally, I just had rice. I was too hungry and I didn't have anything else, and that was already ready. So I just took a bite and I was like, whoa. I look up and there's citric acid. And then I noticed that long grain and short grain seem to always possess citric acid, where jasmine and pastrami, I have not seen them processed that way, and I digest and respond well to those. Quinoa, if nothing else is added, seems to be fine. I do eat quinoa and rice out of the starches. Not a lot, but a little bit. When it comes to brands, okay, I'll go to protein. Fish seems to be fairly okay. Looks like for the most part they use fish like a coloring, and I eat salmon and I know there's coloring. I seem to be fine with salmon. Of course, I cannot eat salmon all the time, so I have to basically limit. There's a lot of mercury in big fish. However, this guy right here is from Costco, and it's wild caught Alaska sockeye salmon. Sockeye salmon is a smaller fish, so it actually doesn't get as much mercury as the bigger fish do, because the bigger fish eat the smaller fish and they just keep accumulating mercury, whereas smaller the fish is, better off you are, like sardines, for example, and I'll go into sardines in a little bit. So this one is just sockeye salmon, and of course, just because it says that on the ingredient doesn't automatically mean you should trust it, because there's such things as clean labels, as I have a video on that. You should check it out. I always contact the company and I ask questions. And then if I try it and I see that it does settle well, then they gain my trust for the time being until they mess it up. Hopefully not. This one is the Wild Planet sardines in supposedly olive oil. The ingredients here are sardines, extra virgin olive oil, sea salt, and something called Akis Natural Smoke. So I contacted the company asking, what is Akis Natural Smoke? Is it the chemical version? Is it the additive? Or is it natural, as it mentions? Because this language, natural, means absolutely nothing on labels. And they confirmed that they achieve this smoke through distillation. They basically trap the smoke into a vapor chamber, and then that's how they do it. I do consume these, and I seem completely fine with them. So they're okay in my books. They seem to not have lied about it. I also eat these ones. This is also just sardines, olive oil, and salt. This one, the olive oil is a lot heavier on this. I always drain them out of the olive oil, and sometimes I even actually rinse it, because I don't trust these olive oils, to be honest. But again, with these products, I have been fine. This is all fish. When it comes to non-fish protein, which has been a hunt, there's this really dry, bland, and uninteresting turkey breast at Costco that somehow is fine. It's this guy. So this particular turkey breast, oven baked, and again, of course, it says no preservatives, gluten-free, nothing added. I don't pay too much attention to those. That's a good start to start asking the questions, but I always contact the companies and ask for more information. This turkey breast appears to be fine. I actually, it's very uninteresting, uneventful, dry and bland, but when I work out and I do not know what to eat and I need my protein, it comes in very handy. It's not your gourmet meal and it's not something you're going to cook for your guests, but it's great when you have a condition and you need to eat something. What else? For my protein, I do order deer meat from New Zealand. I'm going to stop doing that, and I'm actually really excited to purchase meat from Amos Miller Farm. They have been in a battle with USDA for many years now. USDA was trying to shut them down because they refused to comply with their laws, which is precisely what I want. I want a farm that does not comply with USDA laws, because USDA guidelines require poisoning your food. So I am going to actually try Amos Miller Farm beef, and I am so excited to have a burger again in America. And then I will report back what I feel. But of course, I am headed to Italy soon, so we'll see how that video goes. But these are some things that I have been consuming to get by. It's not a lot, because I can obviously, it's just literally just all around me. I'm like, oh yeah, I can eat this and I can eat that. That's not normal, okay? We should be able to eat what the earth can produce, except what the earth produces gets poisoned. Dairy, I avoid dairy in America. I do feel fine when I eat goat cheese. You have to, again, read the label where it's coming from. If it's actually produced outside of US, that's far better. And the labels are a little bit more accurate there. So goat cheese, a lot of the French cheeses, they have the labels and the ingredients. If you don't see anything chemically, usually it is so. Goat and sheep milk stuff seems to be okay for me personally. I eat a sheep milk yogurt from Whole Foods. It costs like an arm and a leg. It's insane. I don't even understand. But I don't react. If I eat tiny bit of dairy, cow dairy, I will break out. Then that's the least of my worries. Of course, I'll start burping and stuff. But when I eat the goat cheese and the sheep milk, if there are no additives, it seems to be fine. Shop at international markets. So if you have, let's say, a Russian store or some kind of a European market, usually their products are labeled more properly. They use those E numbers I've spoken about in my previous videos. So if you have a Russian store and you want to go to their sardine section, for example, or their preserves and jams and whatever, you will get a better understanding of what you're consuming. International markets can be a good way to avoid American products. And it's really sad that I just heard myself say to avoid American products, because I love this country and I just hate what has happened, how we've lost sight. Just really need to figure out how to get this back. And I think there are a lot of great people who are fighting, Amos Miller Farm being one of them, and more farmers should understand that this is not just some small Amish farm. It's not about their religion. No, this is a great operation, and they are they have principles, and they care about human life and health. They care about their family's life and health, and every single human should do what they're doing. Farmer, not human, because every single human doesn't grow food or has cows. Anyway, wine. I like wine. What you should look for if you want to have a glass of wine and feel fine is spontaneous fermentations, no sulfurs added. I actually have no clue if it's pronounced sulfur or something else, but I'm just going to go with that. Most wines will say that it contains sulfurs. There will be wines that will say no added sulfurs or only naturally occurring sulfurs.
Sulfides.
They will be sometimes labeled biodynamic, and there are quite a few brands that, are going into more natural winemaking these days. And Whole Foods has a section, I noticed, that has these organic wines. You have to still read and make sure that it's not talking about just organic grapes, rather natural fermentation. But I do believe that section that's labeled organic wines is actually about natural fermentation, because most of the bottles there I was familiar with, like Petnat Frey is a brand that does biodynamic Zinfandel and Cabernet Sauvignon. There are quite a few South African brands on that list that are natural wines. I think I have one. This was the last one I tried. This is a South African wine. And as you can see, it says no added sulfurs, or I have no clue how to pronounce this word. That's pretty much it. I think as far as what not to eat, I think it's obvious, since what to eat is, I can count on my hands, on my fingers. The rest is what not to eat. Definitely just about everything that comes off the shelves. And honey. However, majority of honey is not to be trusted. If you can find a local beekeeper and buy your honey from a local farm, and you know for a fact it's real honey, honey is extremely good for the gut. But when it's off the shelves, I personally don't trust it. I don't trust it one bit, because when I have real honey, nothing off the shelf has come close to smelling or tasting like real honey. You can taste and smell the nectar of the flowers. It's so, you smell the flowers in the honey. That's honey. And you taste it, and it's just so amazing. I'm clearly hungry. Actually, I have been fasting today because I need to do a couple of day reset. Oh, yeah. Last but not least, fasting. When you fail and you need to reset, fasting is probably the best way to reset. If you can do 7 days, I would highly recommend 7 days. If you can't do 7 days, at least 3 days. If you can't do 3 days, at least skip a day. But any amount of fasting is so good. You're allowing your system to relax for a moment and to calm down. And it's so important not to constantly bombard it with food and request it to digest things when it's already having trouble. So fasting is an amazing tool. I have been working out, as I mentioned, and it's been a while. It's been more than 6 months. I have not fasted for 7 days, but I'm dying to do it. So what I'm trying to do now is I'm skipping a day, skipping a couple days, skipping 3 days, and so on, to try to create a metabolic flexibility so that when I go for 7 days, I don't lose all the muscle that I worked on. Because right now, when I skip a few days, I notice that I do have the metabolic flexibility. I go right back to working out, and I don't lose that muscle. I still look good. But I want to be able to reach a place where I can do 7 days and not lose the muscle I gained. Okay, I think this is the video for food and what I eat. I hope this is helpful. This is one thing that takes you through life. And mind and soul is one thing, but the body is another. And they're all on this realm connected, and it just needs to take us through life. Why crap out at 60, right? Why not live much longer and healthier? Because it is possible. It is absolutely possible. So, all right. Have a good one.